Hey guys, tonight we journey into the blistering heart of ancient Persia, where the air shimmers, the sand stings, and the sun rises not just to illuminate, but to utterly punish. You're standing in a city where summer temperatures laugh at your electric fans, shrug off your refrigerated drinks, and dare you to stay awake. Here, survival isn't just about hydration and hope, it's about design. About finding a way to coax the sky into breathing cool air into your lungs when everything around you wants to cook you alive. And the Persians? They figured it out with towers that don't even plug in. This is a story of hot wind, ancient science, and how you can feel a chill in the desert if you build tall enough, dig deep enough, and whisper nicely to the breeze. The ingenuity's real. The heat is very real. And if you were to wake up in 500 BC Yazd without sunscreen or a wind tower nearby, well, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere warm tonight, let me know where you are and what time it is. Misery loves company. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the chalky dust of the Iranian plateau, high above sea level and dry as bone. The sun's been out since before dawn, and it doesn't let up. Your sandals sink into the hot earth. The air doesn't move, it clings, like cloth straight from the fire. And yet, somehow, in the middle of this oven, people are living. Trading. Laughing. Napping. You step into one of the ancient cities, maybe Yazd, maybe Bam. Winding alleys curve like a maze, narrow as a whisper, flanked by sand-colored walls so high you feel like you're walking through a canyon built by human hands. And every so often, looming above the skyline, you spot them, those mysterious towers. Square, hollow, ribbed with vertical slits. Like chimneys that exhale coolness instead of smoke. It smells of clay and date syrup. The walls around you are made of mud brick, sun-baked adobe, sometimes plastered, sometimes just left bare to crumble a little every year. You run your fingers over it. It's warm. But when you duck into a nearby doorway, it happens. The temperature drops. The light dims. The breeze returns. This building is no palace. Just a home. One room wide, with a small courtyard inside. But a breeze snakes through the open hallway and touches your face. It isn't cold, but after the outside? It might as well be Arctic. You don't know it yet, but what you're feeling isn't luck. It's strategy. You've stepped into a house that thinks. One that breathes. One that's been designed, for over 2,000 years, to fight the sun. Tooth and nail. And it does it silently. This is where the story of the badger begins. Windcatcher in English. But that's too cute a name for what it really is, a passive air conditioning system so clever, modern engineers are still playing catch-up. This isn't folklore. This is thermodynamics, thousands of years early, wrapped in mud and lime. You pause beneath the central tower. You tilt your head. There's a shaft, narrow, dark. It goes up and up. You can't see the top, but you hear something faint. A hum? No. A hush. The sound of air moving gently, guided downward through angled slats that face the prevailing winds, and now comes the weird part. The badger doesn't just work when there's a breeze. It can function in total stillness. Ancient Persian architects learned how to manipulate air pressure, how to funnel hot air up and out while drawing cool air down and in. Some historians even argue whether the earliest towers were invented independently in different regions, or whether Persia's desert engineers cracked the code first and everyone else just nodded politely and copied later. And no matter what, by the time of the Achaemenids, yep, those guys with the beards and gold armbands, wind towers had already made a name for themselves. Xerxes probably didn't sketch blueprints in his free time, but his engineers were onto something. You can almost hear them debating by torchlight. Should we angle the slats 40 degrees or 45? Should the vent face north-northwest or true north? You sit in the shade. Even the silence here feels cooler. Then someone offers you a cup of something. Not wine. Not water. Rose water. Cooled in an earthen jug left overnight in the breeze, wrapped in damp cloth. Ancient evaporative cooling, right. In your hands. Your host doesn't explain the science. He just smiles and gestures to the tower. Like, yeah. That's how we do it here. A few donkeys clomp by. One has a tarp over its back to block the sun. Another is chewing on a pomegranate peel like it owes him money. In the distance, someone sings. The sound is faint, but not distorted. The narrow alleyways funnel sound as easily as they funnel wind. Every inch of the city has a function. Even beauty isn't just for looks here, it's structural. It's cooling, quirky detail time. In some wealthier homes, the Windcatchers weren't just functional, they were competitive. One family might build a taller one just to say their air was crisper. It was the ancient Persian version of having the loudest air conditioner on the block. Imagine the HOA arguments, but even now, as you lie back and feel the draft across your cheeks, you wonder something scholars still debate today: were windcatchers more common in homes or in public spaces? Some argue they were a luxury. Others claim even simple abodes got a piece of the breeze. The truth? Probably both. Persia wasn't a monolith, and not every town had the same tricks. A goat bleats outside. You close your eyes. The bricks still radiate some of the day's heat, but inside these walls? You could nap. And you probably will, because here, in the heart of a desert kingdom, you're not melting. You're not sweltering. You're surviving. Thanks to a tower that doesn't scream, doesn't hum, doesn't buzz. It just works. You wake up groggily, blinking against the soft glow of twilight filtering through an arched doorway. The sun is slipping behind the flat rooftops of Yazd, that ancient city that somehow always smells faintly of dust, mint, and sheep. The air has cooled a little, but it still clings to your skin like old honey. You stretch, stand, and make your way out into the lanes again, where something curious begins to dawn on you. This whole city breathes. You walk slowly, not just because of the heat, but because every street is a riddle. The alleyways zigzag with no obvious logic, shaded by high walls and the occasional wooden lattice that juts out like a forgotten ladder. It looks like chaos, but your instincts start to notice the pattern. These streets don't wander aimlessly. They're narrow to keep the sun from reaching the ground. They curve to slow the desert wind and turn it into a soft, meandering breeze. The houses are low-slung and unassuming from the outside, but behind those mudbrick facades? Miniature fortresses of calm. A long time ago, around the 5th century BCE or earlier, Persian architects started thinking like survivalists. They realized that the problem wasn't just the sun. It was the wind. Or rather, the lack of it. So they built cities where wind was invited, like a guest of honor, and the layout itself became an extension of the bādgirs' cleverness. You pass beneath a wooden trellis covered in drying herbs. Rosemary, perhaps. Or something minty. The shade it casts is dappled and cool. You hear chickens clucking behind a wall and the faint slosh of water in a ceramic basin. Someone's washing dates, or maybe just their hands, but even that sound feels refreshing. A local kid darts past you. Barefoot, not even breaking a sweat. He vanishes down a turn so narrow you'd swear it was a mistake in the masonry. But you follow. And suddenly, there it is, a courtyard. The home around it is typical: 4 sides, a central square open to the sky, a small fountain babbling softly in the middle. Around the courtyard, rooms open onto verandas, each one shaded, each one designed to stay as cool as possible. The walls are thick. The ceilings high. Every architectural choice screams, "Please don't let me die in this heat." Now look up. Above one of the rooms rises the badger again, proud and tall, with its vertical fins catching the sky. Some have 4 openings, one on each side. Others are single direction, aimed precisely at the prevailing wind. You imagine someone, long ago, licking a finger, holding it to the air, and thinking, "Yep. North-northeast. That'll do." And it did do. This tower isn't a gimmick, it's the centerpiece of a ventilation system so efficient, modern engineers visiting Yazd still scratch their heads and wonder how the ancients pulled it off without calculators or duct tape. Quirky sidebar? In some Yazdi homes, the bottom of the Windcatcher shaft connects directly to an underground cellar, known as a Sardab. You go down a few steps, maybe light a small oil lamp, and boom, natural refrigeration. Fruits, meats, even books were stored here. Imagine reading on a hot day, but your little basement library feels like the inside of a chilled clay pot. You'd never leave. As you circle the courtyard, the wind flows through the space like it knows where it's going. It dances through lattice windows and moves the silk curtain hanging over a doorway. There's a pot of water in the corner, its rim damp, its contents cooler than they have any right to be. That's evaporative cooling for you. Drape a wet cloth over a jug, let the dry air do the work, and soon you've got drinkable bliss. Historians still argue whether the layout of these homes was primarily for climate control or social custom. Some claim modesty and gender separation drove the design more than thermodynamics. Others believe the environment always came first, and everything else was just layered on top. The answer, of course, is both. In a city where the average summer day can hit 40 degrees Celsius 104 degrees Fahrenheit, survival and style were never far apart. You step back into the alley, blinking again in the last of the daylight. Now you notice something new. The rooftops. Flat and functional, yes, but often connected. Some families shared roof space, others built domes with holes in them, cleverly designed to let heat escape while keeping the breeze moving downward. It's like every square inch of the city was told, do your part or get out. Another fun detail, in certain districts of Yazd, it wasn't uncommon to find bādgirs clustered like chimneys in a Dickens novel. Street after street had them, each one whispering quietly to the sky, like a row of ancient, introverted librarians. They weren't loud, flashy, or proud. Just efficient. You pass by a small bathhouse. Its dome rises behind a wall, and if you peek inside, you'll find the same design language, vaulted ceilings, subterranean rooms, and yes, a wind tower. Because what's the point of a hot bath if you can't cool off afterward? At this point, you're probably wondering something very modern. Where's the power source? The switches? The thermostat? There isn't one. That's the magic. Or rather, the science. The entire city is a system. From the layout of the neighborhoods to the thickness of the walls, from the positioning of the windcatchers to the presence of small reflective pools, everything plays a part. Yazd wasn't just built, it was grown, breathed into being, shaped by necessity and refined by genius, and you, lucky you, get to walk through it with a slightly dumb look on your face and sweat drying on your neck. You lean against a wall, the texture rough under your hand. There's a cool spot. You stay there. Maybe for a while. You close your eyes and feel the breeze move around you, through you. It's working. You're cooling down, and you haven't touched a single switch. You wake again, not because of heat, but because the city hums with a kind of gentle life. Somewhere nearby, a wooden cart creaks. A rooster half-heartedly announces that it's still the boss around here. The air is cooler than you'd expect. For a desert morning, and when you glance upward from your sleeping mat, there it is again, the badger. You've seen it from the outside, tall, boxy, full of mysterious vents. But now, you want to know how it works from the inside. So you climb. Carefully, ladders carved from the same wood as the ceiling creak beneath your weight. The light dims with every step until you find yourself at the top of the shaft, beneath the wide mouth of the Windcatcher. You're still inside the home, but it feels like you're perched inside a mechanical throat, waiting for it to exhale, and then it does. A cool, dry breeze snakes through the opening, not strong, not dramatic, just enough to whisper past your ears. And now, you start to understand why these things have lasted for more than 2 millennia. The earliest badgers likely appeared sometime around the 4th or 5th century BCE, though no one can quite agree. Some scholars say they were around during the Achaemenid period. Others argue they didn't show up until the Parthians. The archaeological record is fuzzy. Mudbrick doesn't last forever, after all, but the idea? The idea has lasted remarkably. Well, it begins with a simple principle: hot air rises. That's it. That's the entire starting point. Everything else is just elegant manipulation of a truth you probably learned from watching your toast steam. The badger is a vertical shaft, open at the top, and segmented by wooden or stone partitions that can catch the wind from any direction. When the wind blows, it gets caught by one of those vents, directed downward through the tower's shaft, and flows into the rooms below. Simple, but here's where it gets clever. Even when there's no breeze, the temperature differential between the hot air outside and the cooler air inside creates convection. That means hot air trapped in the house rises naturally and escapes through the Windcatcher's shaft, pulling cooler air in through lower windows or vents. It's passive. It's constant. It's brilliant. You sit near the edge of the vent and feel the draft tugging at the loose cloth of your shirt. The air smells faintly of sun-baked clay and dry herbs. You half expect someone to hand you a cup of tea up here. A quirky tidbit for you: some of these towers had internal channels lined with ceramic tiles, or even polished stone, to reduce friction and increase airflow. It's like giving the wind a slide instead of a staircase. One medieval manual even suggests hanging wet fabrics inside the shaft to cool the air further. Homemade AC filters, ancient style. You climb a little higher, just enough to peek outside. From here, you see the city's skyline dotted with these towers. Some are squat and square, others tall and ribbed like ancient organ pipes. Each one catches the wind in its own style, and some even rotate to follow the breeze. Yes, rotating Windcatchers. Persian engineers weren't just smart, they were extra. Looking down the tower shaft, you trace the air's likely path. It enters from above, cools slightly on the way down, and then either flows directly into the room or channels over a pool of water or moist surface to drop the temperature a few more degrees. In some high-end homes, the shaft connects to the basement or even to the aforementioned Sardab, that chilly subterranean chamber that doubles as storage, lounge, and escape room from summer. Historians still argue whether the earliest Windcatchers were meant primarily for cooling people or preserving food. Some believe their first use was in storing ice from ancient yachtals. Don't worry, we'll get to that frosty miracle soon, while others insist they were always about human comfort. As with most ancient tech, it probably started as one and evolved into both. The desert doesn't like waste. Now, imagine this scene: it's the peak of summer, the air outside is practically liquefied, and yet a family is gathered in their central room, laughing, cooking, sleeping, all under the gentle breath of a structure that doesn't need fuel, maintenance, or Wi-Fi. A few families even added small bells or metal strips near the tower openings. Why? Not to scare off birds, but to let them hear the wind arriving. A breeze wasn't just relief, it was news. The musical clink of a bell told you it was time to sit still, pour cool water, and breathe you do. Deeply. Even here, inside this vertical chimney, there's a softness to the air that wasn't there just minutes ago. The Windcatcher has done its job. As you climb back down, you brush against the earthen walls. They're smooth and cool, plastered with a mix of lime, ash, and sometimes a sticky, resinous sap to help repel moisture and bugs. Some recipes even included goat hair. Yes, you heard that right. Goat hair. For tensile strength. And maybe because some goats just had really strong opinions about HVAC, you emerge back into the central room, where the shade has thickened and the breeze still loops lazily through the space. It's no polar vortex, but it's livable. Even pleasant, and what's more, it's free. No wood chopped, no oil burned, no coins handed over to a sweaty repairman. The badger doesn't care if you're rich or poor. It only cares that the wind keeps moving. You sit for a while, tracing the structure with your eyes. From the room to the shaft to the vents at the top. It's both simple and complex, like a child's toy engineered by a philosopher, and somehow, it's still working. After centuries. You can almost hear the old builders whispering down the shaft, "Told you it would work." You're lying flat on a woven mat, not exactly by choice, just trying to avoid becoming a puddle of person on the sunburned floor. But even now, as the desert sun turns rooftops into frying pans, there's movement in the air. Something gentle brushes your skin every few seconds. A breeze. An actual, honest-to-Zeus breeze, and that's when it hits you, literally and figuratively. This is the badger in action. You haul yourself upright, curiosity overriding comfort, and decide to really follow the wind's journey from beginning to end. You march back up toward the base of the tower. The shaft stretches high above your head, open to the sky. It's not a flue for smoke, like a chimney, it's a channel for wind, catching whatever air the heavens are generous enough to give and sending it down into the home below. But it doesn't just fall like lazy rain. It's guided. Redirected. Massaged. That tower you admired from the rooftops? Turns out, it's much more than an opening. It's slats, or veins, if you want to sound like you read ancient HVAC manuals, aren't just for looks. They're angled specifically to grab wind coming from a particular direction. And on multi-directional towers, these veins divide the shaft internally, like air lanes at an ancient airport. When a breeze hits, it gets caught by the tower's most exposed side and shoved downward. But not violently. Persians didn't want a sandblaster in their living room. Instead, the badger slows the air, compresses it gently, and forces it through narrow corridors where it mixes with cooler internal air or schemes across water features. And here's a fun tidbit for your mental scrapbook: in some advanced windcatchers, builders installed internal baffles made of wood or stone that acted like invisible sculptors, shaping the airflow. The result? Gentle, consistent drafts instead of howling gales. Basically, the badger is the desert's idea of air whispering. Still, standing in the breeze's path, you notice something. The air doesn't just come to you, it replaces something. That's the other genius part. Hot, stale air gets sucked upward and out. Why? Because it's lighter. Warmer air expands, becomes buoyant, and rises naturally. So while the badger is catching cooler air on the way in, it's also coughing up the hot stuff like a polite smoker at dinner. You walk into the main living area again and notice how the room is arranged with intention. Low cushions, porous textiles, and no glass windows, just latticed wooden screens or clay grills called bādgirs. These help guide airflow while letting in a soft, filtered light. Shade, after all, is not a luxury here, it's a law. Historians still argue whether the earliest windcatcher builders understood fluid dynamics the way we do now, or whether they simply learned through centuries of tweaking, building, and, let's be honest, guessing. There's no record of Persians in lab coats shouting "Eureka!" But there's also no denying the results. Now you turn your attention to another room, a side chamber with what looks like a shallow stone trench running along one wall. There's a jug of water resting nearby. You crouch to feel it. The air Here is cooler, wetter. Your skin prickles slightly. This is an example of one of the cleverest passive cooling enhancements, water basins or pools placed strategically in the airflow's path. When air moves over the water, it picks up moisture, and that evaporation pulls heat from the air itself. In desert terms, that's called bliss. Even clay jars known as zayers were sometimes used, filled with water and left where the draft could pass over them. 1 breeze, 2 jobs, temperature drop and hydration reminder. You recline again and gaze at the ceiling. Some homes featured a secondary dome or false ceiling above the living area, creating an air buffer. Hot air would rise into this space and get pulled out via the wind tower. The cooler, denser air stayed where it was needed, with you, and let's talk materials. The walls aren't made of stone or marble but adobe, mud mixed with straw or goat hair, baked in the sun until it's as solid as stubbornness. These thick walls aren't just for structure. They absorb heat during the day and release it at night, helping regulate the interior temperature. So even if the bādger stops working, say, the wind takes a vacation, the home still resists extremes. Now here's your fringe fact of the night. In some Persian cities, people reportedly trained pigeons to roost near windcatchers, not for companionship, but because the birds helped keep insects down. In a world before bug spray, an army of cooing, fluttering pest control agents? Not a bad deal. You close your eyes and try to feel the system working. Not just the windcatcher, but the whole house. The architecture is alive with intention. The walls, ceilings, courtyards, and air tunnels all cooperate like old friends at a potluck. The bādger doesn't just bring air in, it tells the building where to send it. It's not a fan, it's a philosophy. A vertical manifesto that says, we may live in a desert, but we don't have to sweat about it. And right now, as your skin cools slightly and your breath deepens, you get it. You're not surviving the desert. You're making peace with it. 1 breeze at a time. The sun is back with a vengeance, pounding rooftops like a drummer on a caffeine bender. But inside this quiet home, you hardly feel it. A low rustle of air curls around your ankles, then rises lazily along your arms. You don't flinch. You don't sweat. You just follow it, curious to see where it's coming from. Now, you duck through a shadowed archway and descend a narrow staircase carved directly into the floor. The air thickens with moisture. The temperature drops by several degrees. You blink into the darkness and realize you're not in an ordinary basement. This is the Sardab, the cold chamber. And it has a secret. You crouch low. Water glimmers faintly beneath a grating. A narrow tunnel opens off one side of the room, stretching downward into the earth like some ancient rabbit hole. That tunnel is part of a qanat, a gently sloped, underground aqueduct designed to tap into distant mountain springs and bring life to places the rain forgot. The Persians didn't just build windcatchers above the earth. They dug arteries into it. And now, those two systems, the wind tower and the water channel, are teaming up to perform an architectural duet. You feel it. A whisper of air moves past your face. It's the bādger again, doing its work, but this time, it's breathing across water. When air flows from the tower above into the Sardab, it rushes over the qanat channel, soaking up moisture and cooling. As it passes, then it drifts upward, re-entering the house like it just stepped out of a cold bath. And here's the kicker, this setup works day and night. During the day, convection currents drive airflow as hot air rises and cool air descends. At night, the temperature difference between the earth and air flips the whole system, gently reversing the current. The house, like a sleeping beast, breathes. In both directions, you touch the wall. It's damp, but not in a gross way. In a welcome to the desert's refrigerator kind of way. Now, let's talk about the qanats themselves. These aren't just trenches or ditches. They're underground marvels. Often dug by hand, qanats could stretch for miles, sloping gently downward from mountain aquifers into the thirsty plains. And unlike canals, they lost hardly any water to evaporation because they stayed underground. The system is so precise, engineers would calculate the angle of descent to avoid both stagnation and erosion. And all of this was done with tools that probably looked like they belonged in a blacksmith's garage sale. Fun tidbit? Qanat diggers were sometimes paid in water rights. If you helped dig a channel, you were entitled to a share of the flow once it was done. And trust me, in a place where rivers are rarer than polite scorpions, that was a serious paycheck. You walk along the edge of the Sardab, and your footsteps echo softly. The ceiling curves gently overhead, forming a low dome to prevent condensation from dripping directly onto storage goods. Pots of food, baskets of fruit, even woolen garments sit down here, quietly preserved by air and time. Then you notice something else. A narrow vertical shaft, off to one side of the chamber, leading back upward. This, too, is part of the bādgir system, a relief vent, allowing stale or oversaturated air to escape. It's a pressure release, a built-in safety valve. Even 2,000 years ago, Persian architects were designing like air traffic controllers. You sit. You breathe. And for a moment, it almost feels like fall. Historians still argue whether the integration of bādgirs and qanats was planned from the beginning, or if it was a later innovation. Some believe the two systems evolved in parallel, finally colliding in elite homes or public bathhouses. Others think it was intentional from the start, a paired system designed to make even the worst summer days feel like a cool sigh. Either way, you're in the middle of it now. And it works. Above you, faint footsteps. Life continues in the upper rooms. You imagine a family gathering, shaded by wooden latticework, sipping on sweetened rose water or pomegranate syrup, their conversation drifting down in soft tones, and all the while, the wind and water collaborate in silence. Now for something weirdly delightful. Some of these systems included shallow stone channels carved into the floor of upper rooms, running cool water through social spaces like little indoor streams. Not just for show, they acted as heat sinks. Sit nearby, and the temperature dropped. Sit on one, and your backside gave thanks to the ancient gods. Of course, this kind of high-efficiency cooling wasn't universal. The grandest versions, multi-directional Windcatchers combined with qanats and underground rooms, were mostly found in wealthy homes, palaces, and public structures like mosques or hammams, bathhouses. But even simpler homes borrowed the ideas: one tower, a bit of wet cloth, a jug of water in the right place, and boom. Instant chill. As you start back up the stairs, you run your fingers along the worn stone. Centuries of hands have done the same. It's smooth in places, chipped in others. The stones feel alive, like they've learned the rhythm of the wind and the water and the people who live between them. You emerge into the light again, blinking at the brightness, but not dreading the heat, because now, you know the trick. You glance back at the tower. It's not imposing. It's not flashy. It just stands there, humming quietly in the desert sky, like an old friend who knows exactly what you need and doesn't need to brag about it. It works with the earth. It breathes with the sky. It cools you without lifting a finger, and it's been doing that for over 2,000 years. You're standing in the middle of the desert, squinting hard, because you must be hallucinating. That ice, a small dome structure, rises from the dusty earth like something from a dream or a mirage, except it's very real. You walk closer, half expecting it to disappear, but it doesn't. The dome is made of thick, tan plaster, and there's a small, low doorway that leads downward into darkness. The outside temperature is somewhere between pizza oven and molten steel foundry, and yet this odd little building contains ice. Welcome to the Yakshul, literally, ice pit. An ancient Persian refrigeration system that doesn't plug into anything, doesn't buzz, and yet somehow stores frozen water in the middle of a landscape where the sun feels like an angry deity with a grudge. You duck through the doorway, and immediately the temperature shifts. Down here, beneath several meters of earth, the air is cold, shockingly so. You can feel goosebumps rising on your arms, the sweat drying on your neck. At the center of the chamber is a deep, wide pit. In winter months, ice would be hauled here from nearby mountains, or, in some places, made on-site using shallow open-air pools that froze overnight thanks to clever insulation and thermal radiation tricks. Persians knew that on cloudless winter nights, even in arid climates, water could freeze if exposed to the open sky and shielded from warm currents. They just took advantage of it. You lean over the edge of the pit. Down there, blocks of ice were stacked carefully, layered with straw or reeds to prevent melting. The dome structure above helped trap cold air and minimize heat transfer. The walls were made of a special sarouge mortar, clay, ash, egg whites, lime, and goat hair. Yes, goat hair again, our unsung hero, designed to be waterproof and insulating. It's genius. Quiet, dusty, goat hair genius. And here's where things get fun. Yakshuls weren't just big fridges. They were part of a larger network. Some had built-in connections to qanats, using the flow of underground water to maintain a consistent coolness. Others were strategically placed near windcatchers, so cooled air could be drawn into surrounding structures, or even used to vent warm air from the yakshul itself, encouraging a constant cycle of refreshment. You sit on a stone bench near the wall. It's cool to the touch. You close your eyes, and you can almost hear the clink of tools, the grunts of workers hauling blocks of ice down the steep steps, the gentle splash of water dripping from a melting corner. Historians still argue whether ice storage was a luxury for nobles or a community effort. Some believe yakshuls served only the elite, preserving precious food and drink for royalty. Others point out archaeological evidence of public access, near markets, caravanserais, even small villages, suggesting ice wasn't just for silk-robed kings. It was for everyone who had the patience to plan for summer during winter either way. The psychological effect of cold in this landscape can't be overstated. Imagine living in a world without electricity, where summer days stretch into weeks of unbearable sun, and then, on some dusty afternoon, being handed a drink with a sliver of ice in it. That's not just comfort. That's sorcery. You rise, walking slowly around the interior. The dome curves above you like a turtle's back, and you realize it's not just structural. The shape helps control airflow, minimizing circulation that might bring in warmer currents. Hot air rises, yes, but in here, it gets trapped high above and never touches the precious cold at the base. And guess what? Some yakshuls were more than just storage. They were manufactories. Persians would flood shallow, insulated pools at night and rely on radiative cooling to freeze thin layers of ice. Workers would then gather the frozen sheets, stack them carefully in the pit, and repeat the process until they'd accumulated enough to last through the burning season. A fringe detail? There's a theory floating around that some ice was scented. Rose water, orange blossom, perfumed ice to cool the body and delight the soul. Like a medieval snow cone without the dye, you run your hands along the inside wall, tracing the faint brushstrokes left behind by ancient laborers. This dome wasn't built quickly. It was shaped slowly, layer by layer, each brick carefully positioned to bear the weight and the heat. Building a yakshul wasn't just engineering, it was patience made physical. Above you, the opening at the top, called a shirineh, lets in just enough light to see, but not enough to warm. And sometimes, those vents doubled as access points for bādgir-like shafts that could pull warm air up and out, speeding the cooling process within. At this point, you can't help but marvel at the interconnectedness of it all. Windcatchers, qanats, yakshuls, they weren't isolated inventions. They were a system. A web of adaptations fine-tuned over generations. Every component respected the others. Every structure listened to the land, and all of it, functioned without burning a single drop of fuel. You step outside again, blinking against the glare. The wind is hot again, a slap of reality. But you glance back at the dome and grin. That building behind you just outperformed your modern fridge, and it doesn't even have a door. The beauty of it? There's no fanfare. No noise. No power bill. Just physics, architecture, and a quiet agreement between people and place. It makes you wonder how much of our modern life is loud just to feel useful, because this little dome, half buried, half forgotten, has been whispering, "Stay cool," for centuries, and somehow, it still is. You walk slowly now. The kind of slow reserved for heat-heavy afternoons, when every footstep feels like a decision. But the city is still alive. Not frantic, just deliberate. It has rhythms for heat. Rituals. Survival here isn't a frantic battle, it's a practiced art. You find yourself wandering toward a hammam, a traditional Persian bathhouse. From the outside, it's humble. A squat dome with a modest doorway. But step inside, and you're in another world. The air shifts again. That signature cool-warm blend, like stepping into a warm cave that hasn't decided whether to embrace you or chill you out. The floor is stone, polished by centuries of sandals and spilled water. The walls are tiled in faded blues and deep turquoise, cracked in places, still shimmering in others. And the light? Filtered through tiny, star-shaped holes in the domed ceiling, like bathing beneath the Milky Way. But what does this have to do with wind towers? Everything. This bathhouse has its own bādgir. You spot it from the central hall, a tall tower. Jutting from the roof, angled like a ship's sail toward the prevailing wind. You might think, why cool a bathhouse? But that's where the Persians' brilliance shines. It wasn't about cooling the water. It was about controlling everything else: humidity, airflow, evaporation. You duck into a side room, a sarbana, the changing area. The air here is cooler, drier. It's where you start. The bādgir is already working, pulling out hot air and letting in just enough breeze to make undressing bearable. The walls are thick, of course, and there's a small fountain at the center. It burbles, because Persian architects understood something we still forget: sound cools the mind, too. Fun fact? In Yazd and similar cities, bathhouses were sometimes cooled and heated using passive systems. The hot areas got their warmth from underground furnaces or cleverly placed thermal mass. The cool areas? Bādgirs, moisture-catching basins, and the natural chill of buried chambers like you saw in the Sardab. It was a climate sandwich. You move into the warmer rooms. The steam rises, scented faintly with herbs, perhaps basil or bitter orange peel. Not overpowering, just enough to remind you that this isn't about getting clean. It's about slowing down. Shedding layers. Becoming human again. Here, the bādgir's job shifts slightly. Rather than blasting in wind like a hero in a cape, it works like a surgeon, subtle, precise. Pulling out excess humidity to prevent condensation damage. Providing just enough air movement to prevent the room from becoming an accidental soup pot. Engineers knew that airflow didn't have to be fast, it had to be smart. Some towers and bathhouses had water channels routed directly beneath them. Warm, moist air would rise into the shaft, replaced by cooler, drier air skimming across the surface of pools. Others used a dual flue system, one channel pulling stale air out, another drawing fresh air in. It was all about balance. Historians still argue whether Persian bathhouses borrowed their climate design from the homes around them, or whether they were the testing grounds for innovations like dual bādgir systems and underground airflow tunnels. Some even think the communal nature of the hammam pushed engineers to design better, faster, and quieter systems to keep everyone happy. After all, no one wants to overheat while getting exfoliated. In one corner of the room, you spot a small recess near the floor, a whispering vent. It's no wider than your hand. A low, horizontal slit built to draw air along the base of the wall. Cool air enters down low, displacing the warm air above. And the room adjusts. Just like that. And here's something quirky: bathhouses were often built lower than street level. Not by accident. This sunken design helped keep them insulated and more easily connected to qanats or water basins. Combine that with a few smartly placed bādgirs, and you've got a building that can bathe hundreds without ever overheating. You sit near the fountain in the Sardabs again, watching the air dance across the water's surface. A fly lands, then quickly escapes. Even insects know where the breeze is, and let's not forget, hammams weren't just about bathing. They were social hubs. Business meetings, marriage negotiations, even poetry recitals took place between buckets of warm water and flicks of olive oil soap. You can just imagine someone leaning in to whisper, "The airflow's excellent today, isn't it?" And getting a solemn nod in reply. You tilt your head and listen. Not for voices, but for the tower. It's there. That low, constant hush. Not enough to disturb. Just enough to prove it's working. Every inch of this place has a role. The domed ceilings curve to reduce echoes and promote thermal layering. The tiles reflect light without absorbing heat. The corridors twist, not for mystery, but to buffer airflow and prevent drafts from turning polite conversation into wind tunnel chaos. You leave the hammam and step back into the heat. Somehow it feels less cruel. You've seen the belly of the system now. You've watched a tower tame humidity. You've felt cool air snake through steam like a phantom with a sense of decorum, and for one fleeting moment, you wonder why modern buildings ever stopped listening to the wind. The bādgir doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't blink, beep, or fail during a blackout. It just waits, catching the wind, directing it gently through the places that need it most, and in the hammam, it found the perfect dance partner: water, wind and water. Structure and silence. Survival and luxury. All in one. You're wandering again, letting your feet decide, and they lead you down a long, winding alley. The kind with walls tall enough to block out the sun entirely, throwing everything into that golden half-light where every sound feels hushed. You walk slowly. There's no need to rush. The air moves softly around you, carried by some unseen force, and then you hear it, the hum of conversation. The clatter of pots. Laughter. You've stumbled into a bazaar, not the noisy, tourist-packed ones with aggressive vendors and questionable fridge magnets. This is older. Quieter. A shadowed arcade of shops tucked beneath vaulted roofs, where windcatchers, yes, even here, still play their quiet game. Look up. High above the tiled domes of the marketplace, you see them, bādgirs rising like ancient antennae, catching the high breezes and channeling them downward into the covered walkways. You're still in the open air, technically, but the shade and the draft work together to make the temperature feel shockingly comfortable. You duck into a corridor lined with spice stalls. Cardamom, saffron, cumin, rose petals, the air is thick with scent, but not with heat. That's the magic. Even in a crowded space where heat should build up quickly, the windcatchers are doing their job. You feel the breeze pass over your arms and under your collar, chasing the sweat away before it even starts to stick. Fun detail? Some of the oldest bazaars in cities like Yazd and Kerman weren't just covered to block the sun. They were engineered to work with wind. Vaulted ceilings created a natural chimney effect, and the strategic placement of bādgirs allowed each passage to be tuned, yes, tuned, for airflow. You're basically walking through an ancient air conditioning circuit. In one side alley, you spot a small tea seller. His samovar hisses quietly beside him. He's seated beneath a high arch, legs crossed, sipping from a tiny cup and looking like he hasn't broken a sweat in a week. You sit beside him, and for a moment, neither of you speaks. The breeze speaks for both of you. Historians still debate whether windcatchers were ever status symbols. Some believe the wealthy built tall, elaborate towers as displays of prestige, like having the best view or the biggest courtyard. Others argue they were simply practical, taller towers reach higher, cooler winds. More fins mean better airflow. Whether it made you look rich or just smart is still up for grabs, but here in the bazaar, they're the great equalizers. Everyone benefits. Shoppers, merchants, wandering dreamers like you, and it wasn't just about comfort. The cooler air helped preserve goods, fabrics stayed dry, grains resisted spoilage, spices kept their potency. In a climate that laughs at your need for shelf life, a bit of breeze could mean the difference between profit and disaster. You wander deeper. The architecture changes slightly. Domed ceilings now have oculi, small, circular openings that let light spill in while allowing heat to escape. Combined with windcatchers, these acted like pressure valves, ensuring warm air didn't linger long enough to make anyone faint mid-bargain, and some bizarre corridors weren't just cooled by wind. They were linked directly to qanats running beneath the city. In certain shops, the floor hides a narrow grate, and from beneath it comes a faint sound, the trickle of water. This undercurrent, hidden but constant, helps stabilize the air temperature and adds moisture to the otherwise dry atmosphere. You sit for a while at a carpet stall. The merchant is explaining the difference between tribal and city patterns, but your eyes keep drifting upward, watching the movement of the hanging threads as the breeze stirs them like lazy dancers. No one notices. This is just the way things are. Here's a quirky tidbit: some bādgirs in commercial districts were fitted with flaps that could be opened or closed manually to redirect airflow. Sort of like an ancient dimmer switch, but for the wind. On particularly hot days, vendors might angle the flaps to catch a stronger gust, then reposition them once the sun shifted. Climate control is a team sport. You pass a corner where dried herbs hang in dense bunches: thyme, mint, chamomile. The scent is strong, medicinal almost. But beneath it, you detect something familiar, that whisper of cool, dry air that makes your lungs expand just a little more easily. And the people here? They move like they trust the city. Like they know it's looking after them. You see an old woman laying out figs on a cloth, a boy chasing a wheel rim with a stick, a clerk nodding off mid-haggle. All of them at ease, because here's the truth. The city is looking after them. The bazaar, the bādgirs, the bricks and mortar and curves of every ceiling, they're all conspiring to keep people from boiling over. In body and in mood, and you, stranger in the market, are suddenly part of it. You close your eyes, listening to the layered hush of airflow, footsteps, conversation, and the occasional bell tied to a doorframe. A breeze curls around your neck like a scarf, and you smile without thinking, because you're not just in the market. You're in its lungs. By now, you're starting to feel like the wind itself, drifting from place to place, slipping through alleys and archways, floating up towers and down into cellars. So it makes sense that your next stop is high above the city. You climb slowly, each step taking you higher toward the rooftops where pigeons roost and laundry flaps lazily. The view stretches out in all directions: domes, courtyards, bādgirs, hundreds of them, some tall and proud, others small and squat, clustered like desert sentinels. And then you notice something subtle: not all bādgirs are the same. Sure, they all catch the wind, but their shapes, their angles, their openings, they vary wildly. You're standing now before one with a cross-shaped opening for vents, each facing a cardinal direction. It's like the wind has a menu and gets to pick its own door. This is the classic chaharfazal style, literally, for seasons. Always ready, always watching, this design works no matter which way the wind turns. There's always one open face exposed to the breeze, channeling it down into the home. The other sides? Acting like passive chimneys, helping pull air out. It's like the building is constantly adjusting its own breathing. Without asking for permission, now look down at another rooftop. That tower is octagonal, 8 faces, each a narrow slit. A more complex version, possibly designed to accommodate turbulent urban airflow or tighter rooftop clusters. Some believe these elaborate forms weren't just practical, they were architectural signatures. A kind of passive cooling fingerprint, and here's a fringe tidbit for your inner design nerd: a few bādgirs were fake. Built solely for symmetry, or to show off status. They didn't catch wind, they caught eyes. Ornamental spires mimicking the real thing, just there to say, look at me. I'm breezy, even if I'm not. Of course, most of them were functional. Some even included internal wooden vanes that could be opened or closed from inside the house, an ancient form of climate control. Want more wind? Pull the cord. Want less? Push the panel. We're talking pre-electric, analog ventilation settings. You pause for a moment, watching a thin ribbon of dust spiral up from the street, tugged skyward by some invisible current. Even the wind here knows where it's supposed to go. Historians still debate whether bādgir shapes evolved regionally due to climate or because of cultural aesthetics. Was the four-faced tower a nod to Zoroastrian cardinal symmetry? Or was it just a really practical way to deal with unpredictable mountain winds? It's one of those delicious, unanswerable questions. You walk along the parapet, careful not to disturb the sleepy cat eyeing you from under a broken tile. From this height, you start to notice other parts of the city's passive cooling strategy. The alleys are narrow, funneling wind like rivers. The buildings are tightly packed, creating shade but allowing airflow. Even the domes are helping. Round shapes minimize sun exposure while encouraging interior convection. You see one house where the bādgir isn't even a tower, it's more like a hood, curved like a seashell and angled directly into the room below. No moving parts. Just physics in a headscarf, and you realize there's no standard here. No one-size-fits-all air system. Every home is a little different. Each tower is a solution to a specific need, in a specific spot, facing a specific wind. You crouch next to a vent. You can hear the air moving, just barely. It's a faint rush, steady as breath, punctuated now and then by the flapping of fabric or the caw of a distant bird. This tower is doing what it was born to do. Silently. Efficiently. Tirelessly, and as you run your hand along the sun-warmed clay, you feel the texture, rough, weathered, but still strong. The plaster here has been reapplied who knows how many times. Smoothed and patched by generations of hands, none of whom needed a user manual or a phone app to figure out how this thing worked. You sit cross-legged near the edge, gazing across the skyline. It's easy to romanticize it now, but this was survival. There were no backup plans if the heat became unbearable. There was only ingenuity, intuition, a deep understanding of wind, stone, water, and time. Some towers are crumbling now, broken or sealed. Others are still humming quietly. You watch a pigeon disappear into one, only to emerge from another side, perhaps grateful for the breeze, or just hunting breadcrumbs. And here's a quirky design detail. In rare cases, bādgirs were paired with domes that had hollow, double layers. Hot air rose between the layers and was pulled out by the tower, while cool air circulated below. A kind of dome-breathing system that looked ordinary from outside, but inside? It was like living inside a thought experiment. A final thought before you head back down: these towers aren't just technical marvels. They're cultural ones. They say something about trust. Trust in the land. In tradition. In quiet solutions over noisy ones. You take one last look at the wind slipping through the slats and smile. You've just spent the afternoon on the roof of a 1,000-year-old air conditioner, and somehow, it still works. Evening is coming on now, and you feel it first in the shift of the wind, cooler, steadier, less frantic than it was at midday. The air brushes your cheeks with a kind of kindness, as if to say, you made it. You're wandering again, because that's what people do when the sun begins to soften. All across the old city, life stretches out of its shadows. Families move onto rooftops. Tea is poured. bread is broken. And up there, like ever-watchful guardians, the windcatchers start to shine, literally. The golden light hits their edges just right, turning each one into a glowing spine on the city's back. You pause in a quiet courtyard. The day's heat is slipping away fast now, and this space, surrounded by high mudbrick walls, lined with jasmine and fig trees, feels like it belongs to another world. You inhale deeply. There it is, that cooling perfume of dust, flowers, and fresh air channeled straight from the bādgir, and in this golden hour, you notice something you didn't before. The sound. Not silence, but a hush. The kind that comes when the world has built itself to support stillness. One small bādgir hums above you, its slats catching the last breath of the day's wind. It sends the air downward, into a stairwell. That leads back to the Sardab below, yes, that cool chamber with its ancient stone floor and faint smell of earth. The house isn't cooling off, it's recharging, because now, something incredible happens, the temperature gradient flips. The air outside is cooler than the air trapped in sun-warmed walls and floors. And so the bādgir, like a smart lizard, changes strategy. Instead of pulling cool air in, it starts pushing warm air out. This isn't just a machine. It's a dialogue. Between building and sky, historians still argue whether the people who built these systems fully understood thermodynamics, or whether their success was purely the result of centuries of tinkering and observation. But here, in the soft glow of twilight, the debate feels irrelevant. The evidence is around you. It works. And it feels like wisdom. You sit near a shallow water basin in the center of the courtyard. The stone is warm beneath you, still holding on to the sun's memory. But above it, the air swirls gently, another case of air passing over water, cooling. As it flows, the basin's surface shivers now and then, touched by invisible fingers, and here's a strange, lovely detail: some windcatchers were designed to create sound. Subtle musical hums or soft whistles as the wind passed through certain openings. Not loud enough to disturb, just enough to remind you that the air was moving, that the system was breathing. Imagine your home whispering to you, "Relax. I've got this." You glance toward the open kitchen. Bread is baking in a small tandoor oven, tucked into a shaded niche. Even the cooking spaces were planned with airflow in mind. Vents at floor level. Openings near the roof. Cross-drafts designed to sweep heat out fast before it could stew anyone alive, and yet, the most striking thing is how calm it all feels. Here, passive cooling isn't a backup plan. It's the foundation. The bones of the building. It means your comfort doesn't rely on moving parts, or wires, or hope. It means your entire house is a cooling system. You sip a cup of water, still cool from a clay jug that's been sitting in a shaded corner all day. Those porous clay walls let water evaporate slowly, and as it does, it draws heat out of the remaining liquid. A little miracle of physics, performed quietly on the countertop, and if you're wondering, yes, some bādgirs were even connected to underground storage rooms for these jugs, ensuring every sip was refreshing, even in the thickest part of summer. You lean back against the courtyard wall and watch the light fade. The tower above you is barely visible now, a silhouette etched against the dimming sky. And still it works. Still the air moves, because even in darkness, the desert doesn't stop. And neither does the wind. You hear footsteps on a nearby rooftop. Someone adjusting bedding for the night, maybe setting out pillows on the terrace for a little stargazing before sleep. Because yes, many people here sleep on rooftops during summer. Why not? The air is cooler, the view's better, and the bādgir, rising just a few feet away, whispers all night long. One final quirky tidbit before you drift too far: some windcatchers, especially in communal buildings or caravanserais, were maintained by specialized caretakers. People whose job it was to patch, clean, adjust vanes, or even add scent-soaked cloths inside the ducts. Climate control technicians in robes and sandals. Imagine that on a resume, you stand up now, stretch a little. The courtyard is darker. Quieter. Lanterns glow behind grills. Somewhere nearby, a family sings softly, and overhead, the badger doesn't rest at it exhales, because comfort here is not artificial. It's earned. Through centuries of listening. Through trial, error, genius, and patience, and it flows, like this breeze, through every doorway and down every stairwell of the sleeping city. Night falls softly in the desert, not suddenly, like in some places, but like ink spilled into warm water, slow, steady, inevitable. You stand again on a quiet rooftop, feeling the last of the heat slip away. Below, the city hushes. A few murmurs. A final door click. The air is shifting once more, and this time, it's drifting in reverse, because now, the badger exhales, the walls, warmed by hours of sunlight, begin releasing their stored heat back into the night. It's a silent glow, like a stone memory of the day. But the windcatcher knows what to do. As the air outside cools faster than the air within, it pulls warmth upward, flushing it out, refreshing the home like a sigh after a long breath. You head back down into the heart of the house, past the quiet courtyard, down the now familiar stairs to the Sardab. And it's even cooler now. Not just by contrast, but in that deep, earthy way that tells you the system isn't just holding on, it's thriving. The air smells faintly of lime plaster, clay, and moisture, a clean, mineral scent. A kind of architectural lullaby, and you begin to understand the true rhythm of this system. It's not just a one-directional trick. It's a cycle. Heat rises, cool descends. Air is drawn, filtered, moistened, dried, and released again. The house breathes like a living thing, an organism made of stone, water, and wind, and here's a strange but true tidbit: in some cities, at night, entire neighborhoods hum with this process. Badgers working in unison create a collective airflow. A barely audible rustle that moves across rooftops and into streets. It's like the city itself is cooling down after a long day. A shared exhale between neighbors. You crouch by a wall, noticing again the thick layers of adobe and plaster, materials chosen not just for tradition, but for insulation. Thermal mass is the unsung hero here. These walls absorb heat during the day and release it at night, smoothing out the extremes. No sudden spikes. No sharp drops. Just balance. Historians still argue whether this system was ever perfected, or if it simply evolved and diversified to meet local needs. Some claim certain cities had ideal ratios, one windcatcher for every 2 rooms, for instance. Others suggest families adjusted designs over generations, treating badgers less like devices and more like heirlooms, passed down, repaired, respected. You reach the upper floor again. The living spaces are quiet. Mats are laid out. Curtains hang still. But the air moves, just slightly, like a hand brushing your forehead, and this is where the wind tower really shows off. Because unlike mechanical systems, which cycle on and off, clicking and wheezing, the badger never stops. It never wakes you. It just works. You pass a window and glance out into the dark. Stars blink back at you. The Milky Way pours itself across the sky like spilled salt. There's no light pollution here, no electric hum, no neon signs, no compressors kicking into gear. Just moonlight, silence, and air that feels like silk on your skin. And here's a delightful oddity: in some regions, people would sleep with their heads pointed toward the direction of the badger airflow. Not for superstition, but because they believed dreams were clearer, sleep was deeper, and even headaches faded faster in the cool current. The wind, quite literally, had a reputation as a healer. You smile, imagining ancient insomniacs rearranging their bedding for optimal airflow. You'd probably do the same. A door creaks open somewhere. A child pads across the floor barefoot, looking for a glass of water. The air still flows past them gently. They don't think twice about it. For them, this is just how the world works. You grow up with the wind whispering through your walls, and you learn to trust it, and trust, it turns out, is the backbone of all of this. You trust that the tower will catch the wind, that the qanat will keep flowing, that the sardab will hold the chill, that your house, your family's house, your neighbor's house, will know what to do when the next summer comes. That the desert can be your partner, not your enemy. You step outside one more time, barefoot on cool tile, and feel the breeze against your neck. You glance up at the tower. It looms gently above the roofline, silent, ancient, reliable. Here's something odd and wonderful. Archaeologists have found bādgirs in places where the prevailing wind never reaches. And yet, they work. Why? Because hot air rises. Even without external wind, these towers draw out heat like chimney flues. They're not just wind catchers, they're heat evacuators. Form follows function. And sometimes, function teaches you something about patience. The city is asleep now. Truly asleep, you lie down on a mat near the courtyard pool, the sky overhead framed by vines and stars. You let the breeze touch your arms, your face, your fingers. You hear it move through the bādgir like a whisper shared between old friends, and you wonder, quietly, lazily, what your own home might feel like if it breathed this way. If it remembered the wind. No blinking lights. No hums. No maintenance fees, just air, moving as it was always meant to move. You close your eyes, and you sleep like stone. You wake slowly, not to an alarm or sudden noise, but to a warm stripe of morning light stretching across your legs. The air is cool, miraculously cool, because the wind tower never stopped working. While you slept, it kept the house comfortable. Loyal as ever, you stretch lazily on the rooftop mat, blink at the pale dawn sky, and listen. The birds have begun their chirping, the occasional door creaks open, and somewhere, someone's already baking bread. But mostly, the city is still wrapped in a kind of hush, and above it all, the bādgirs wait. Ready for another long day of battle against the sun. As you wander downstairs, something else sinks in. These ancient systems, these bādgirs, qanats, Sardabs, they weren't just practical responses to climate. They were a worldview, a design philosophy, a belief that buildings should cooperate with nature, not wrestle it into submission. And now, as the sun starts rising again, you begin to appreciate just how deep that philosophy goes. You step into another home, smaller this time. A craftsman's house. Modest. But still, the same principles apply: high walls, inner courtyard, a single wind tower rising above like a lighthouse for breezes. This isn't a palace. It's just smart. Even the layout of the rooms is intentional. Spaces used in the daytime are positioned near the Windcatchers' strongest air channels. Sleeping quarters face away from direct sun. Storage rooms are sunken. The building itself is a map of thermal logic, and here's where it gets interesting. Many homes were built with not just one wind catcher, but 2 or 3, each angled differently, each tuned to a particular season. A winter-facing tower would help push out rising heat on cool days when fires were lit. A summer tower would channel breezes over water features, or directly into bedrooms. It's like your house had a mood ring, adapting, shifting, reacting. Without wires. Without switches. Just design. A quirky feature you spot? A small covered opening in the courtyard floor, with a pulley and a little basket. It's the top of a shaft that leads down into the Sardab. Families used it like a dumbwaiter for cold drinks or to lower fruit into the chilled depths. Instant snack elevator, powered by gravity and goat string. Historians still debate whether these passive systems were shared knowledge, passed down like recipes, or whether certain guilds controlled the secrets. Some believe master builders were entrusted with design blueprints, scribbled into notebooks or memorized like sacred chants. Others argue that these methods were communal, evolving as each family added a tweak or borrowed an idea. Either way, the results are right in front of you. You pass into another courtyard, this one filled with grapevines. A small channel of water runs along the perimeter, part of an ancient irrigation system fed by the ever-reliable qanat. And of course, the badger is there, too, watching, breathing, but this time, you notice how the Windcatcher's base is subtly flared, like a trumpet. The idea? As the air flows downward, it expands slightly, cooling further through that pressure drop and distributing more evenly through the rooms below. You remember that science demonstration, when someone blows air through a narrow tube and it cools as it expands. Same principle. Only here, the effect is part of your living room. You crouch beside the water channel and run your fingers along the stone edge. It's wet. Not because it rained, this is a desert, after all, but because the water was released overnight, carefully rationed from the qanat, helping cool the courtyard by adding gentle humidity to the air. And here's another clever touch: many homes use specific types of trees in their courtyards. Not just for beauty, but for climate regulation. Fig trees offered heavy shade and needed little water. Pomegranate trees provided filtered sunlight and stayed cool to the touch. Mulberries attracted birds, which in turn kept insect populations down. Every detail played its part. You rise and follow the airflow again, this time noticing how doorways line up across rooms, not by accident, but to allow uninterrupted breezes. When the wind blows just right, you can stand in the front hall and feel it pass through the entire home like a whispered sentence. No fans. No noise. No click-clack of thermostats. Just wind, honored and invited. You pass through a narrow hallway with small ventilation slits carved high into the walls. The light spills in gently, and the air here feels like it's been carefully measured. These slits are sometimes called bādgirs, designed to fine-tune internal air movement, to reduce turbulence, to quiet the house down, and in the quiet, you realize how musical this house is. Not just in its sounds, but in its pacing. It feels composed. Like someone wrote a slow, delicate melody in mudbrick and lime. Here's a fringe theory: some researchers believe Persian architects designed their spaces not just for airflow, but for acoustics, ensuring that the breeze wouldn't just move through, but with grace. That it wouldn't rattle doors or moan through vents. That it would sing. As midday approaches, the heat returns. But now, it's like watching a well-rehearsed performance. The building tenses, prepares. The wind tower adjusts its rhythm. The air stays light. The space stays calm. You lean against a pillar and look up at the tower again. It's not just a cooling tool. It's a statement. A flag planted in the face of the sun, saying, "We know how to live here. And we don't need to shout about it." The heat has fully returned now. The sun blazes overhead like it owns the place, but you're fine. Surprisingly fine. Because you've started to trust this ancient architecture. You've started to move like it wants you to, slow, deliberate. Shady when possible, barefoot if you dare. You duck into a public building, an old caravanserais, once a resting place for travelers and merchants along trade routes that stitched the world together. It's massive. Stone arches rise on all sides. A grand courtyard yawns at its center. And there, crowning the central chamber like a dusty crown, is one of the largest bādgirs you've seen yet. You've seen windcatchers on homes, on bathhouses, on bazaars. But this? This is a beast. The tower stretches high into the sky, flanked by decorative brickwork that's both beautiful and functional. You step inside the main hall, and a wave of cool air washes over you like a blessing. You breathe deeply. You almost say thank you out loud. Caravanserais needed this. They housed dozens, sometimes hundreds, of people, animals, goods, and fire-prone things like textiles and dried herbs. Heat wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. But this place, despite being centuries old, feels like a secret climate sanctuary. You walk along the tiled floor and see the logic: multiple towers, each positioned to draw air across wide common spaces. Vaulted ceilings collect hot air high above where anyone could feel it. Stone floors, thick as tree trunks, radiate stored coolness upward. The whole place is a fortress, not against enemies, but against heat. And here's something charming: the ceilings above each chamber have small, funnel-shaped openings. They're not for decoration. They allow hot air to rise directly into ducts connected to the bādgirs. It's like the building is constantly skimming warmth off its own ceiling, the way a barista might scrape foam from a latte. You pass under one of these vents, and sure enough, the air is moving. Not fast, but steadily. And that's the magic. This isn't aggressive airflow. It's patient, persistent. Like a trickle of water that eventually wears down mountains. Historians still argue whether these multi-bādgir systems were developed in parallel across the empire, or if they originated in just one or two experimental cities before spreading outward. Some claim that the knowledge moved with merchants, traders, and even religious pilgrims, packed between bolts of silk and crates of dates. In one dusty chamber, you spot something that makes you pause: an angled mirror built into the wall, bouncing sunlight into a side room without letting in direct heat. It's rudimentary solar design. The Persians were playing with light the way they played with air: carefully, respectfully, with intention. You lean against a thick column and look around. This place isn't just about comfort. It's about generosity. Imagine arriving here after weeks in the desert, parched, blistered, half lost. And then stepping into this cool, hushed space. Not refrigerated. Not artificially chilled. But still a miracle. And here's a quirky little rumor: some caravanserais had a kind of breeze rating. Travelers would pass the word, "Stay at the one in Yazd, the air's better," or avoid the Shiraz post house unless you like waking up sticky. Climate comfort was part of the marketing. Passive cooling as a 5-star review system. You wander into a smaller chamber, likely used for storage or prayer. There's a faint mustiness, but not the kind that comes from rot or mildew. Just old paper, dried herbs, sun-dried bricks. You feel a breeze even here, faint but persistent, like the building is exhaling memories. And then you notice something especially smart: the bādgir here is connected not just to this room, but to adjacent rooms through a series of ceiling channels. So if a breeze enters one tower, it doesn't stop, it moves laterally through the structure, cooling every space along the way. It's not just vertical airflow. It's architectural choreography. You pause beside a small pool at the center of the courtyard. It's shallow, clear, and glinting with reflected sky. And of course, strategically placed. The Windcatchers draw air across its surface, cooling it before pushing it into rooms beyond. You feel like the water and the tower are co-conspirators, like they've been partners for centuries. Above you, pigeons circle the bādgir. The air shifts. Somewhere, a door creaks open. Someone lights a lamp. The heat hasn't gone anywhere. But it hasn't won either. Not here. You sit on a stone bench beneath a tree, and suddenly, you understand something that no blueprint could have taught you: these towers weren't just additions. They were promises. Every brick said, "We'll make this work. No matter how hot it gets. We've got you." A final delightful aside: some caravanserais used windcatchers as beacons. Because of their height and distinct shapes, they could be spotted from miles away. Tired travelers would look for those strange, slender towers on the horizon and know they were close to water, shade, and rest. And that, really, is the magic of the bādgir. It's a utility and a symbol. Practical and poetic, because sometimes, all you need to keep going is the promise of a breeze. By now, you've walked through houses, bazaars, rooftops, cellars, and caravanserais. You've ducked under bādgirs short and tall, elegant and patched, solitary and clustered like a crown of thorns. And maybe, without realizing it, you've been chasing the same question all along. Why did it stop? Because clearly, these towers worked. They weren't decorative. They weren't a fad. They cooled entire cities for centuries, quietly, sustainably, beautifully. And yet, where are they now? You sit on a low wall overlooking the edge of the old city. Beyond it, in the hazy distance, the modern skyline begins. Flat roofs. Steel beams. Satellite dishes. And, sadly, not a single windcatcher among them. You sigh. It's not just you. Historians still debate when and why windcatchers began to fall out of favor. Some say it was the rise of electricity. Why bother with towers and ducts when you could just flip a switch? Others blame rapid urbanization, cramped construction, concrete blocks, and cookie-cutter layouts that left no space for towers to breathe. And then there's the whisper of something sadder, that people simply forgot. That younger generations were taught to chase progress, not tradition. That windcatchers became old-fashioned, associated with poverty, or too slow for a world obsessed with instant comfort. You imagine someone tearing down a centuries-old bādgir to make room for a satellite dish. It makes your stomach twist a little, but the story doesn't end there, because just when it seemed like the towers had vanished, something curious began to happen. Architects and engineers, many of them young, many trained abroad, started looking back, not for nostalgia. For solutions, they saw rising energy bills. They saw suffocating cities. And they saw these silent towers from the past, waiting. You step into one of these modern buildings now. Yes, it has glass and steel and Wi-Fi, but there it is, a windcatcher. Sleek, adapted, reborn. It's taller, more angular, fitted with adjustable vents and filters. But the principle is exactly the same: catch the wind, guide the air, let the structure do the work. It's called bioclimatic architecture now. Or passive design. Or vernacular revival. But you know what it is, it's breathing. Some architects are even combining old and new, linking bādgirs with solar-powered fans to give them an occasional boost, or pairing them with green roofs that cool and insulate at the same time. Others are digging qanat-inspired cooling channels beneath office buildings, or crafting wind towers out of recycled materials. It's not widespread yet. But it's growing. In Iran. In India. In the UAE. In parts of North Africa. Even in parts of California and Arizona, where the climate is ripe for such rediscoveries. And here's a quirky fact. One eco-friendly university in the UK built a windcatcher-inspired ventilation tower, and students nicknamed it the Cullinator. Centuries of design reborn. With a name worthy of a robot sidekick, you walk through the building's cool hallway, admiring how the air flows across stone floors and up through slender vertical vents. There are no AC units. No hum. Just silence. Peace. Sanity. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, you find an old photo tucked into a corner of the lobby. A snapshot from the 1930s, a family in Yazd, seated beneath a tall windcatcher, sipping tea, smiling at the camera. The past is waving at you. You wonder if they ever imagined their tower would end up as a footnote in a university thesis, or reborn as a prototype in a London skyscraper. You step back outside, into the heat of the day. But you're smiling, because the towers aren't gone. Not really. They're sleeping, waiting. You walk past an old neighborhood now, partially preserved, partially crumbling. You spot a windcatcher half buried in scaffolding. It's covered in dust and pigeon droppings, but its shape is unmistakable. You imagine what it would say if it could speak: "Don't forget me. I still work," and you believe it. You lean against a mudbrick wall, feeling the warmth seep through your shirt. The air is still for a moment, and then a breeze stirs from somewhere above, brushing past your face. The tower is listening, and maybe, just maybe, we're ready to listen again too, because here's the real secret: innovation doesn't always mean something new, sometimes, it means remembering. You're in the oldest part of town now. The sun is low again, casting long golden shadows across narrow alleys. A breeze tumbles down one of them, cooler than expected, like a secret passed from one wall to another, and as you follow it, you arrive at a house that hasn't changed much in centuries. The kind that still trusts its bones. Mud brick walls, thick and quiet. A central courtyard filled with pomegranate trees and the soft burble of water in a shallow channel. And above it all, the badger, tall and serene, catching the last of the wind like it's cradling the sky. You sit under an awning, watching the way light filters through grapevines and dances on clay tile. There's something about this moment that feels final. Or maybe timeless. As if the house knows you've come full circle, the air moves softly around you. No rush. No roar. Just the quiet rhythm of breath, drawn through spaces designed not just for function, but for grace. In the corner of the courtyard, a woman brushes dust from an old clay jug, sets it down near the water, and retreats inside. She moves like someone who's done this 1,000 times, and suddenly, it's easy to picture the generations before her, tending vines, washing in shade, dozing beneath that same breeze. You begin to understand that this isn't just engineering. It's memory. A living archive of hot days and quiet survival. Here's a curious detail: in many traditional homes, it wasn't just the wind tower that mattered, it was how the rooms were used throughout the day. Families would migrate like clockwork: breakfast in the morning room where the sun was soft, rest in the shaded Sardab come noon, dinner in the courtyard when the breeze returned. The house was a compass, a calendar, a collaborator, and here's a whisper from history: some elders insisted that children born in homes with bādgirs grew up healthier. Fewer headaches, fewer fevers, deeper sleep. Maybe it was science. Maybe it was storytelling. Or maybe it was just the wind doing what it does. You wander the rooms one last time. They smell of stone and citrus peel. The plaster is cracked in places, but it doesn't matter. The structure holds. The air moves. The tower breathes. Historians still puzzle over one final question: were windcatchers ever truly abandoned? Or were they just sleeping beneath layers of dust in time, waiting for someone to notice they'd been right all along? You step outside. The street is quiet. A child runs past you barefoot, laughing, a kite tugging wildly behind him. He turns into the alley, and the badgers above catch the movement in their silent gaze. You pause beneath one of them, this one patched with newer bricks. It's plaster modeled by time. But still, it stands. Still, it listens, and then the wind comes again, cool, dry, gentle. It slides past your ear like a whisper and vanishes into the tower's opening. You feel it pull upward, as if the whole city is exhaling through its bones, and you know, this system was never meant to dominate nature. It was meant to partner with it. To honor it. To move with the wind, not against it. It's almost dark now. You sit on a rooftop, alone but not lonely. Around you, the city glows, faint lamps behind lattice windows, smoke curling from tiny chimneys. A hush that settles like silk. The breeze continues, softer now, but steady. You close your eyes, and you let the wind do what it's always done: cool, comfort, carry you into stillness.